What's up, y'all? I'm Will here with Schedulefly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, one of the highest rated hospitality podcasts in the world, brought to you by us at Schedulefly. We provide a very simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're on some software with tons of bells and whistles and features you don't need or use, Schedulefly is the perfect place for you. Easy to use, point, click, and go, and we'll take great care of you. Schedulefly.com, free trial, check it out. Also, this podcast is brought to you by our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Webstaurant Store, the ultimate destination for restaurant pros. Whether you're launching a new cafe or prepping for the holiday rush, we've got you covered with top-notch equipment and everyday essentials, all at unbeatable prices. And right now, you can score $50 off your order of $250 or more when you use this code, WebSave50. All together, all one word, all caps, WebSave50 at checkout. Again, that's WebSave50, WEBSAVE50. But act fast, because this deal ends December 31st. Visit webstaurantstore.com to keep your kitchen running strong. Hey, what's up, y'all? This was a unique episode. This is Sam Oches, who is an editorial director at Informa. So he's in restaurant media. And like me, did not grow up in the restaurant industry, but also like me over the last 15 years has learned to appreciate and respect and love and learn a lot from the restaurant industry, and is a big advocate for the restaurant industry and hospitality. And this was both inspiring, this is educational, this is a thoughtful and intentional conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I know that you will too. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.
So my name is Sam Oches. I am the editorial director for Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality magazines, which are a part of Informa Connect Food Service. Also serve as editor-in-chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
Nice. I read your LinkedIn, man. You've had an interesting career path, so congratulations. You're clearly
Thank you.
doing something you love and doing a great job with it.
I appreciate that. I've considered myself the luckiest person in the world because I could be writing about a lot of other industries that are not restaurants.
Yeah.
But I'm writing about restaurants and part of this industry, and I feel like that's just, I'd never set out to do that intentionally. So the fact that I stumbled my way into this industry is the biggest stroke of luck I could have ever hoped for.
Well, tell me about that, because I saw okay, so you're up in Columbus, Ohio, right?
That's right. I live in Columbus now.
Is that where you're from?
I'm from about an hour south of Columbus in a town called Athens, Ohio, which is where Ohio University is.
Ohio University. But were you down in Chapel Hill for a little while, or was that just part of the?
I was. Yeah.
Okay.
I lived in Durham for 13 years.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so you've been down here. Got
my second home. North Carolina is my second home. Absolutely. And a story about that is I graduated college, and a week later I moved to Durham to be the associate editor for QSR magazine, and then was there for 12 years before I was recruited to join Nation's Restaurant News and Informa, and then was in Durham for another year as we looked for a house in Columbus. The intention was always to move back. We had kids, and it was time to go home and be closer to family. So that's what we did in 2022. We moved back.
You get out of college, and I saw that, looks like, so this must have been the career you were targeting, just not necessarily in hospitality. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. When I was in college, I wanted to be the next great Rolling Stone journalist. I was going to be a music journalist.
All right.
Yeah. And I'm a musician, and all 4 years of college, I covered bands and live music and shows. And I wanted to be that guy, the Cameron Crowe, go on the road with the bands and maybe be in the band, but also write about it. That was the dream. And I graduated in 2009 out of Ohio University, and there were no jobs. So
No, they're sure
not
not.
only
That's right.
there were no jobs, period, but there were no journalism jobs, and there were especially no music journalism jobs. I had a girlfriend at the time who is now my wife. Knew we wanted to get married and start our life together, and I knew that I needed income. So partway through college, I pivoted to business journalism because I knew that was my best shot. I had a great college advisor who told me, like, you'll find a job if you go into business journalism.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I found a job right out of college, which most of my friends either couldn't find jobs or just went to grad school because that 2009 was just awful. There was just nothing for college
Mm-hmm.
graduates. So again, lucky that I stumbled into that role at QSR magazine and was ultimately there for 12 years.
Well, with every success story, it's like some balance of, skill, luck, and hard work, man. So, those other two pieces are part of that for sure, outside of the luck. You, okay, then I have to ask so what instrument do you play?
I'm a drummer.
Oh, yeah, man, I'm a big Dave Grohl fan. I'm a little disappointed at him right now, but,
I think I have let's
do
see.
you have the
Here we go.
storyteller up there?
Storyteller right here. Yeah, these are all my music biographies. Because yeah, same. And also likewise as disappointed. It's like if Tom Hanks suddenly turned into a monster. I mean, well, I shouldn't. I'll reserve judgment. That's not my place to comment on that whole
Well, just
situation.
you're just kind of the thing about that is like it's always been like he's this exception. He's the good guy, he's like this guy. I got my kids all like they're all into the Foo Fighters. And I was like, well, kids, you never put anybody on a pedestal. Here's why. But
Yeah.
okay, so you're a drummer. What kind of music do you play?
I am currently in an 80s cover band,
Oh,
is
dude,
my
awesome.
current thing. Yeah, we're called Nakatoni Danza.
No way.
Um,
Nakatoni Tower.
yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, we were Nakatomi Plaza and found out there's another band called that, so we went with Nakatoni Danza instead.
That's an even better
So
name,
I
Nakatoni
know, actually, I'm
Danza.
really happy that ended up working out for us. We've got these great here. I'll show you I don't know if people are watching, but
Oh,
those are our band
that is
stickers.
awesome. Can I find your music? Like, is it on Spotify or somewhere? Or
No,
you have
we don't do originals because we're
because you're
just 80
just a cover band.
covers.
Yeah.
We're fairly new. We're on social media, but like with a handful of followers. We mostly the longer story is I played in bands in college, and I had a punk rock band and a folk rock band in college, and a couple of guys from both of those bands started this 80s cover band, and it's based in Athens still. So I have to commute for band practice once a month from Columbus, which isn't too bad. But so we play sort of small bars there in the college town, which is great because there's lots of fun to be had doing that. But we're not a very large scale band yet. Our goal is eventually to have the repertoire to be able to play weddings and stuff, right? Because 80s covers, that's what I think that
Oh,
weddings
this
would be
is so awesome.
our sweet spot because that's where the money's at. So, but yeah, I did, mostly rock. Like I said, I was in punk band in college, and I think that's what I listened to a lot growing up. And then you can see I've got White Stripes record right here, and
Yeah.
Jack White right here. I just picked those up in Nashville while I was there for Create. Went over to Third Man Records, Jack White's record shop. So that's my wheelhouse, what I like to play. But I have three kids. I can't really, I don't live that life anymore. So that's
Yeah.
why the 80s cover band is a little bit of a sort of low hanging fruit for me right now.
That's so. What are some of your favorite songs that y'all play?
Oh gosh. So Nakatoni Danza, we play gosh, well, and here's if you want to really find us, you can go to Spotify and find our playlist
There
because
you
we
go.
do have a playlist, Nakatoni Danza. So just like Heaven from The Cure, Melt With You, Modern English, We Got the Beat, 9 to 5, Working for the Weekend.
Yes.
We do this insane 18 song medley that's about 25 minutes long, where we just do little snippets of a bunch of songs. So we like to have some fun with it, that's for sure. And I dress like John McEnroe. We all dress like 80s characters, and I'm John McEnroe. So yeah. This is
Dude,
how I'm serious from 9 to 5, and then I'm just a dummy on my off
you're
time.
brilliant, man. I got to tell you, like Look, I'm 50, bro. Like guys like me would be all over that stuff. Like I mean, God, we grew up on it, right?
Yes, that's who comes to our shows. We've got a lot
I was
of
gonna say,
Gen X.
oh, that's great. Well, they have a lot of fun and probably have, a little extra cash to spend and hang. So that's probably a good audience to serve.
Totally. Yep. We're playing bars where they have a few rounds and dance, and it's great. Again, it's sort of a low stakes. You know what I mean? It's like when
Yeah.
you write originals, you take them very seriously. You want a lot of people to come out because it's sort of a judgment on your creative process. But we don't care if two people show up to our shows because it's like we're just
You're just having fun.
yeah, we're just a goofy band playing 80s covers. And in fact, that actually you tend to get more people with that because of course they're really familiar with your music.
Dude, I'd put a tip jar right on that stage, man. You get a bunch of 50-year-olds like me drinking, like, hey, give them
Yeah,
$100, man. That song was frank because you're
it's been
calling back,
okay.
like, this. This is why I say it's brilliant because you're reminding folks like me and like my friends and my peers of our childhood, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
the formative years of our lives, and with that, the '80s were like a pretty freaking awesome decade, and kind of an iconic decade, and there's nostalgia and there's all this stuff.
Totally.
You guys are capturing like a lot. That's really smart, man. I love that. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
glad I asked you about that. I think that's awesome. I gotta
I
figure out a
could.
way to get up there and watch y'all play sometime, man.
You should do it. Well, we should hit the road, and I won't go down this road too much because I know we're here to talk about restaurants, and I'm sure some people listening have heard me tell this story before. But the punk band I was in college was a banana themed punk band called Bananarchy, and we wore banana costumes and played banana themed songs. Now there is a music video for that. If you look for Bananarchy on YouTube, there's a music video, and I only bring this story up because what I am dying to do someday is play at a food function. I like at the National
Yes.
Restaurant Show, and it's like I've told all of my colleagues, we own the National Restaurant Show. I've told all my colleagues, like, if y'all want just a goofy, fun banana themed punk rock band, I am prepared to reassemble the bananas for that. So you've heard it here. And if we need to get Chiquita and Dole in on the action and sponsor something like that, that it could happen. We can make this happen.
Okay. I tell you what, I'll give you a low stakes handshake offer to do this. Is like, what we'll do is if you guys want to, especially if you'll travel, you come down here to Durham and I'll get a bunch of schedule fly customers, somebody to host it, and then we'll invite all of them. We'll sponsor it and let you guys have your first taste. And we'll just
Deal.
just
Oh,
have a
we'll
bunch
do
of
it.
hospitality people hanging out. Well, because it all goes together, right? I mean, that's why I wanted to.
Yeah,
I didn't want to just like brush this part aside because it's entertainment and hospitality, and it all those things are closely aligned. And where there's a good confluence of like hospitality and great music, man, like, magic happens. So,
totally agree. Yeah, and I spend a lot of my days now on stages because with all of the conferences we now have in our portfolio, I have the great privilege of being on stage to moderate sessions and MC those things. And then to be on stage with bands and being on stage, one thing I can tell you, no matter your industry, but especially this industry, it is about having fun. Nobody
mm,
wants any stiff on a stage, right? Like if it's boring, slow, whatever, dry, you lose the attention. Everything is always about that fun, that hospitality from the stage because the audience, that's how you engage with the audience, right? And it's no different than in a restaurant, is the hospitality and service you provide from the wait staff to the kitchen to whatever. It's look at it all as a show, right? Like and people will go for the show, they want a good time, and they're going to leave with that impression of that good time if you're able to facilitate it. So that's why I think I'm very comfortable on a stage because I've been dressed as a banana on a stage. I've been dressed as John McEnroe on a stage. I tell my colleagues I'll do the stupid stuff because if it's all in the service of the audience having a good time, I don't really care.
well, look at the Savannah Bananas and what they've done with going out there and doing something, putting
Totally.
themselves out there and being different. Um, well, okay, so before we get in, I want to get into your career and I want to talk about what's going on with restaurants and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I'm a I'm a dad, as you're a dad, and I see your I Love Dad coffee mug back there
Yeah.
behind you. And I went through some of your posts and I saw the note that you got on your computer screen that day when you were you were talking about like working at home. So, how many kids do you have, and how old are they?
I have three kids, an 8-year-old daughter named Mabel, almost 6-year-old son named Jude, and then a 7-month-old named Bowie.
Uh, oh, look at that's awesome,
And
Bowie.
yes,
Yeah,
he is named after David.
that is freaking awesome. Well, you're a blessed dude. It sounds like you married your college sweetheart, or
Mhm.
and you got three kids, and you're pursuing something you love, man. So like, you got a lot to wake up and be grateful for every day. I tip my hat, man. That's amazing.
For sure. And it's, it's a busy life, as I'm sure yours is too, right? It's nonstop morning to night. And in the darkest moments of that, when I'm just like, I just need a break, I remind myself 20 years ago, Sam, a college student, if I'd said to him what your life is going to be like in 20 years, I would have been like, stop. There's no way. There's no way.
Sold. Yes, I'll
So
take that.
very
Yep.
exactly. I'm like, that's exactly the life I want. So I do have to count my blessings for sure.
Well, here's the thing, man. Um, I work out of my house too, and those early years when my kids are older now, they're 20, 17, and 15, daughter and two sons. When they were those ages ish, like, is really hard. The daily tactical and logistical grind in balancing that and having a busy work schedule is like, can be overwhelming and exhausting. Then
Yeah.
they get to be, but you're like their hero, right? Mom and
Mhm.
dad are their heroes. And then they get to be teenagers, and they're like, I'm going to, and they start spreading their wings, which they're supposed to do, but you're not like as needed, especially when they get cars. And then they go to college, and you're like, oh, dude, I would give anything for those days if I had them back. Cause now it's
You
like,
you miss what I've got.
dude, I went out of town recently and I came back the next day. My son's like, I was like, yeah, I was at whatever. He's like, you were out of town last night? I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know I was gone. Like, so
Yeah.
you get that piece and you're just like, so it's not the physical and tactical stuff. It's the emotional stuff when they get to be teens. And then you're always worried about them. Like, they're going out into the world and all the risks and all the stuff that's out there now. So enjoy it,
Yeah.
even though, yes, tough. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So you get done and tough time. Yes. I remember 2008, 2009 very well. Um, not in a positive way, but you go down there to Durham, you get this job, and this is now your connection to hospitality. Had you worked
Mhm.
in restaurants before, or ever had any experience like bussing tables or anything? Because this is like you're just
No.
getting into something and learning
Uh,
from day one.
yeah, it's embarrassing now, knowing what my career has become. But I mowed lawns as a teenager, and then I got like when I was a freshman in college, I got a desk job as an assistant with one of the university offices. Never worked in a restaurant, and so 15 years now in this industry, covering this industry. I feel like I might as well have. And I've also, for the sake of content, been able to be in the kitchen and do some cooking. So I've like, fake worked in restaurants before. But no, never worked in a restaurant. And I do actually regret that now. Although who knows? I mean, maybe when I found this restaurant magazine job, had I worked in restaurants, maybe I would have been like, nope, not going back into that. Again, very, very fortunate that it has worked out as it did because this industry, to your point earlier, this is a people industry. I am a people person. I thrive on extrovert. I thrive on relationships and social connection. And so being a part of the restaurant industry, it's fun. It's constant connection to good people who want to again have a good time. And there are trade magazines for pretty crazy industries, right? I mean, there's trade magazines for everything, right? So I could have found a job at a plumbing trade magazine. I could have found a job at a, welding trade magazine. And it's not to, dismiss those, by the way, because I'm sure there are great magazines in those fields, but I would have never, ever known anything about those fields. Like I would have come in way more from scratch if I was covering those industries than coming into writing about restaurants. At least at the very least, I was a customer. So I
Right.
knew restaurants from the customer perspective. And, QSR, of course, covering national quick service chains. I was a customer of businesses I was writing about. So I at least had that familiarity coming into it of what these businesses serve, what they're all about, what their brands are. And not, I didn't have to start from scratch. So in again, another big feeling like that was very lucky for me to end up in that.
Hey, y'all, running a restaurant, as we all know, is no easy task, but Webstaurant Store has your back. From heavy duty equipment to everyday kitchen essentials, we've got everything you need to stay stocked all year long. And right now, you can save $50 on your order of $250 or more when you use the code WEBSAVE50 at checkout. That's WEBSAVE50, WebSave50. But hurry, this offer is only available until December 31st. Visit webstaurantstore.com today to snag some savings. And y'all, I'll throw in this piece. That's what they asked me to say. These folks are awesome to work with. They have a great website, highly regarded, a lot of happy customers, and we're super stoked to have them as a sponsor. So go check them out, webstaurantstore.com. And again, that code is WebSave50. Thanks. I started this podcast like, I don't know, it was somebody, we were just talking about this like 12 years ago or 14. I mean, I literally was doing this before there was actually a way to actually even distribute the podcast. I was recording conversations on speakerphone on a $35 mic I plugged in the USB port of my laptop because I was trying to, and we would literally we would like embed the audio file in our blog for schedule fly. Like, I was like, yeah, but nobody's listening to this. Like, no. And it was like when you had to beg people to do a podcast,
Yeah.
but my thought was I wanted to learn from successful restaurant operators what it takes, because back then my thought was restaurants are cool. I want to own a restaurant one day.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't take me long of listening to very successful restaurant owners to realize I don't have what it takes. I don't know how you do it, but I've got so much respect for what you do because I had no clue previously how hard it is to do what you do. I mean, I had worked like a couple of restaurant jobs, like bussing tables, and I was salsa boy at a salsa place down in Jacksonville, Florida one summer. But I didn't, I mean, I had no clue. Like, I didn't get it,
Yeah.
just dumb teen boy. And when I really started talking to these folks, I'm like, wow, so you give everything to this, your life, your livelihood, your sweat, your blood, your tears, your money, your time, your energy, like 24/7, literally 365. And sometimes you can make some decent money, but mostly you're just doing this because you really like to take care of other people. Like, that's kind of what I envision as like the quintessential restaurant owner. It's just
Yeah.
somebody that wants to make somebody else feel good when they enter their establishment and have a memorable experience. And what it takes behind the scenes to pull that off effectively and consistently, in my opinion, is light years beyond what the average restaurant customer has any clue about.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you think about how many people say to themselves, I want to open a restaurant, and they might have a variety of reasons for wanting to do that. The big one, just because it sounds cool, it sounds fun. But those who really get to the finish line, I mean, it is a labor of love, right? I mean, you have to be passionate about it. You have to be passionate about creating those experiences because it is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life to open a restaurant, right? I mean, the bass player for Nakatoni Danza, he owns a coffee shop, and it's been around for now 20 years. But he told me, the first 3 years he was there open to close every single day to make
Yep.
sure that it was successful. He barely saw his family. It was just the constant grind, and that is the reality for most restaurant owners, is that you have got to be ever present in that restaurant until you can build a team or build systems or whatever it is that gets it to be, a little bit more self-sufficient. There's a reason that the statistic is something that like 60% of restaurants fail within their first year or two, I think. Because it's hard. It's just really, really hard. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. It's those people who finally get there to that point where the restaurant's open, it's able to sustain itself, so they're not, having to do everything. Like you can tell the passion because of that much. It was that hard for them to get it open. They pushed, they persevered, they got to the finish line, and now they get to live that dream of being able to provide those great experiences for their guests. So, it's like my favorite part of my job now is talking to especially founders because they are the heartbeat of their organization. And I love talking to all, people in the industry. Of course, I love talking to CEOs, C-suite members, but you can tell when there's a difference with a CEO or a C-suite member who, kind of came into a company, inherited it from a founder or from a previous CEO, and how they approach that business versus how the founder approaches that business. There is a difference. And I'll tell you too, when people ask me, well, how does Chick-fil-A do it? How does Raising Cane's do it? How does Texas Roadhouse do it? You want to look at each of those brands and tell me what the difference is they're all founder led. You know,
Mm.
and now and I've been very immersed with Texas Roadhouse recently because they're our brand icon for the year, and so we're about to roll out a big package on them. Of course, their founder Kent Taylor passed away a few years ago, and they went from founder led to now founder inspired. I mean, he is all over their support center, their headquarters, and it was just a reminder for me that again that there needs to be a heartbeat to the restaurant, and it's usually that founder because that's the person who had that passion and that drive to get this thing off the ground. They tend to be then the North Star to keep things humming along, to keep that success going.
Man, that is such a great point. I didn't, okay, so their founder passed away. Well, you had a post about this. That's right. So they have this guy in there now so they're your brand icon. What does that mean? They're your brand icon.
So we started this award in 2022, and we had a couple different awards. We still have an award called Hot Concepts, which is for emerging brands, which is to recognize, brands with 10 to 30 locations that we think could be the next big thing. And that's been around for many years. In fact, Raising Cane's was a hot concept, Shake Shack was a hot concept, Kava. So when they were much, much smaller, we identified them as the potential next big things. And we in 2022 said, well, we recognize the emerging brands, but we shouldn't dismiss the impressive work that the major chains continue to do. And when you think of some of these
Yeah.
major chains, I mean, it's still very impressive to consider some of these companies that are generations, they've been around for generations. And to think how they still continue to thrive and innovate. So the first year we awarded White Castle, which I mean, come on, it's been around over 100 years and it's still relevant. And
Mm.
then last year we recognized Taco Bell, and Taco Bell, perfectly emblematic of here's a brand that's been around 60 years. But you name one other restaurant company today that innovates as much as they do, right?
Right.
So we created this award with brand icon to acknowledge, as we say, those restaurant brands that live at the intersection of legacy and innovation.
Mm.
So this year's winner was Texas Roadhouse, which it's been around for 31 years, not quite as long as Taco Bell or White Castle, but it is when you dig into Texas Roadhouse's success in the past few years, especially, it is just remarkable what they're able to accomplish against all odds. That's this big box casual dining chain that operates in a lot of really small communities around the country. And it just slays. I mean, if you look into their financials, it is just remarkable what they're able to do. And they're dinner only. So, that was where we wanted to acknowledge that success, and their innovation is more on the back end. They do more around ordering and kitchen and things like that, but they don't do delivery. They don't hardly ever change their menu. There have only been a couple of changes in the history of the company. So when we say that we're recognizing them for innovation, it's more around some of the things they've done operationally. But that's brand icon. We're going to do it every year. So no thoughts yet as to who next year will be, but it will be another company that again is big chain, but still innovating and maintaining relevance.
I hear so many great things about Texas Roadhouse and the people that operate that business. What you mentioned they're doing things, the back end and innovating, but what is it? What are they doing so well? Like how are they able to do what they're doing in these small towns as dinner only and be so successful?
I'd say the secret. The secret is this managing partner program that they have. So very
Okay.
similar to Chick-fil-A, by the way. So if you're familiar with Chick-fil-A, or Raising Cane's for that matter. If you really want to know how to be a successful restaurant company, I mean, I don't think that those three right there are the ones that you should be studying, because of how they've structured their companies. So with Texas Roadhouse, they have these managing partners, similar to Chick-fil-A's owner operators. The managing partner, they are somebody who's been in the system. So often somebody who's worked their way up in a restaurant has been identified as, somebody in the talent pipeline who's got leadership. And Texas Roadhouse, of course, there's demand to grow. I think they grow roughly 25 restaurants per year. So 25 people then get the opportunity to open their own restaurant. They buy into it. I think they spend $20,000, $20 or $25,000 of their own money.
Skin in the game.
And yep, they got skin in the game. And then they get 10% of their bottom line. So as
Yeah.
Texas Roadhouse says, they make their own paycheck. And so what is so key about that is that then they are the ones who are hustling every single day in their local community to get the name of to get Texas Roadhouse out there, to be a part of the community. Texas Roadhouse does not do any national marketing. They do all local store marketing because their theory is that managing partner, by being a part of the schools and the churches and the businesses in each community where they operate, by doing that, they're able to build that loyal customer base in that community. And it's very, very successful that they have that skin in the game. To your point, they're hustling to get that, 10% of the bottom line, which is extremely lucrative in a lot of cases. And they are a part of their community, every which way they can be, so that it becomes sort of that community restaurant. And I think about, my hometown, Athens, Ohio, very small college town, but there is a Texas Roadhouse there, and arguably I don't want to say the best restaurant there, but it is among casual sit down, certainly chains, is by far the best thing going. And so that's where everybody in the area is drawn to. And that's how they're able to be so successful, is because they're able to become that very community oriented restaurant.
That is a very, very cool model. And it makes that's the intersection of having all that comes along, the muscle and marketing, well, not marketing, but all of the resources that come along with having a backing of a national brand, with the model that you would have if you were just an independent operator of your own restaurant in a town. You've got to be, I mean, I love that. I did not know they operate that way, but that's huge. And it's interesting because you mentioned three brands that have a very similar setup in some way. Skin in the game, one location, a lot of local stuff, and then the there's so many that do it so differently, when there's like this roadmap right there for how you could do it really successfully.
Totally. Yeah. And one thing I remind everybody is that you think of Chick-fil-A as an example. Chick-fil-A's first restaurant was in the 60s, I believe. You cannot snap your fingers and go back in time and start a restaurant company and then build and then just have that brand affinity, right? These restaurant companies, I guess another one I should point out here is also In-N-Out, which
Yeah,
has a
for
similar
sure.
model and has been around since the 40s. These companies have the unfair advantage of having been around for a long, long time. So they've dug deep, deep roots into their communities. They've built vast talent pipelines. They have culture that, goes back multiple generations, but continue to be very family oriented, family led. I mean, Andrew Cathy, who is the CEO of Chick-fil-A today, is the grandson of the founder, right?
Yeah.
So that is not something that you can easily do. If you're starting a restaurant company today, that means you have to hope that you or your family are still operating your restaurant in 2084. So,
Right. Right.
and have turned it into a national success or whatever. So you can't just snap your fingers, make it happen. However, there are best practices. I mean, I think slow and deliberate growth is is a cornerstone for a lot of these companies. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I have seen example after example of a restaurant company that said, we're going to open 500 in 3 years, or whatever, give me high number, short time period. It does not work. I am here to tell you, don't do that. It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. I have never seen one company do that and then continue to succeed. They usually fall flat on their face. And I'm not saying don't dream big. I'm just saying if you look at the successes of the national chains that have been successes, they really, especially started with slow and deliberate growth. As they built their culture, as they built their systems, they maybe ramped up that growth a little bit more. Jersey Mike's, another good example. Jersey Mike's
Mm,
is
great example.
crushing, and Peter Cancro is still at the heart of that company. They now are opening 200 locations a year, but they weren't, 5 to 10 years ago. Since the 70s, Peter Cancro has been building that thing deliberately and with intention. And now he's able to start opening 200 restaurants a year because the culture and the systems in that company are just so, so strong. So I don't know. That is what I would say to anybody who's trying to scale their restaurant. If they're a restaurant founder owner and they're trying to scale, do it deliberately, do it intentionally, do it, don't race out to any. It's not a race, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, the old cliche. But also people first, right? And that's the other thing about all those companies that I've named is the very, very intentional culture that they've built to take care of their people, keep their people around, develop the talent, recognize that talent by giving them ownership in the company. All of those things are, for me, sort of the secret recipe that makes a very successful restaurant chain.
None of these brands you've mentioned started with an exit strategy.
Right.
Guaranteed. There
Yeah, they
isn't
started
one.
with a love for what they did, right? And the love for their
Th-
community, wanting to serve their community.
There may be an exit one day, but it was never started with the intention of an exit. And because a successful exit for Peter Cancro would be the byproduct, not the goal. That guy's,
Right.
it's one of not just one of my favorite restaurant owner stories. It's one of my favorite entrepreneur stories, business stories ever, because that dude
Yep.
borrowed money from, I think it was his football coach or his PE
Yep.
teacher or something when he was a high school student
Yep.
to buy that first location. And from that day until this day, he's the guy. To
He's the
have
guy.
the skill set that he has clearly mastered to go from a high school kid to where he is today and be the person throughout the entire life cycle of that business and all the skill sets you have to have or learn to master through all that growth is outstanding. I would give
Yeah.
anything to have him on this podcast one day because I have a billion questions I'd love to ask him. But the
And by the way, very humble dude.
I
Like
bet
if
he is.
he might even, I've had him on the podcast a couple of times. I've been fortunate enough, and he's the real deal. Because some of these people, I've met a lot of people in very powerful positions, and it's like they live on a different planet. Um, he's not one of them. He is a very humble guy. He gives you his time and attention, and and that's what to me is just so emblematic of the success of that company.
Dude, I will give you $1 billion if you get him on this podcast, Sam. I'll make you that deal right
Can
now.
we write that? Get that on paper? That'd be great.
Austin Powers, man. I would love to have him. I think his story is really cool because I just think that's so. I can't imagine taking it through all those levels and all of the different economic cycles he's been through. I mean, he went through 2008,
Yeah.
COVID. I mean, just all these, and recessions and booms and busts and all the people that he's had. It's quite fascinating. But you're right. A buddy of mine um, wrote a book called The Hockey Stick Principles a few years back, and he talks about, um, people are always looking for this quote hockey stick growth, but he reminds you so much in that book is like you have to get through what he calls the blade years. Like you think of a hockey stick, it's like, okay, well, if you want to get this compounded nonlinear growth, guess what? You got to get on through the blade years, which are flat and they're hard and they're stressful. And most people get off before
Yeah.
that compounding starts to happen. And the reason Jersey Mike's is doing 200, that's compounding. It's just like investing, like
Yeah.
start investing when you're young and take 10% of your paycheck and put it aside into an S&P fund. Hey, and wait 30 years and then it'll really start to make a difference. But like that's when it happens is way down the road when you've been diligent and stuck with it and been consistent and focused, and then you benefit from that. But you can't create
Yeah.
that. I mean, you might get lucky, like I don't know. You hear the stories on, I mean, you're in journalism, like you'll get some cover story on Fortune magazine about some dude who wrote some code and, 3 years later he's a billionaire. That's like such a unicorn story that's like, again, if there's like luck, skill, and hard work, big
Yeah.
portion of that's luck. Um, Hard to replicate that. Better to just go, I'm going to be intentional and deliberate and give myself 3 decades or whatever it is. And that's where the real magic happens.
Totally. And look, if you're doing this for money, you're in the wrong industry, right? I
Amen,
mean,
brother. Amen.
there can be money down the road, no doubt. Todd Graves of Raising Cane's is worth reportedly over $7 billion. But that is the unicorn, right? That is the very extraordinarily rare example of somebody who got to that point. In this industry, there is not a get rich quick scheme here.
No.
So to your point, it's all that time in that compounding. Now, the dividends on your investment in your teams and in your culture and your systems is that a company like Jersey Mike's has this just embarrassment of riches when it comes to people that they can select for franchisees, right? So they can select people who have been general managers for several years and that they can trust to be a franchisee. And this is not to poo-poo franchising, but franchising, by nature of franchising, you can give a franchise to anybody who waves a check in your face, fine. But you're not always going to have people who are totally bought into your system and your brand and your product. You have people who want to be a business owner and this is their way of doing it. And again, that's fine and that's worked out for a lot of people. But for these companies that have worked for so many years to invest in that culture and that team and that development of their team, and they get to a point where they have 100 general managers in their system who could be good franchisees, and they award 20 of them a year, like that's why these companies are so successful, because then the GM for the last 10 years, who now owns their own restaurant and now gets to be the boss and gets to, profit off of that, they care a whole heck of a lot more than the person who waved that check in your face and they don't maybe even know what they're doing.
Exactly. Amen. Totally agree with that. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that maybe they want to leave corporate America or whatever it is, and they've got the money, but boy, you got to have somebody that's really, really, really bought in. One thing it's interesting you mentioned about Jersey Mike's. I'm curious because they're at a point now where they've been long enough where you're going to start seeing what I know a very specific example. I know a guy, and his dad has 18 Jersey Mike's locations, and his dad has always been 100% Jersey Mike's. It's the only brand I want to have, and like I'll just keep growing through Jersey Mike's. But his dad's retiring, and his son's taking over, and his son's like, don't know if I want all my eggs in one basket. So he's buying into a different franchise brand to sort of diversify. Are you, is that like a outlier example? Or are you seeing or hearing about more of that stuff? Not just Jersey Mike's, but it seems like there's a lot of people now that are going with this multi-brand diversification, which is interesting because then you're not necessarily fully bought into that brand, but I
Sure.
also understand the logic of being like, I want to take I want to take the skill sets I learned as an operator in this brand and apply it to this brand and maybe this brand here in my geographic footprint so that I'm not so tied to one brand. And it seems to be that more of that's happening now, but maybe I'm just talking to people that happen to be doing that.
No, I think you're right. I mean, that's definitely not an outlier. Now, look, the first thing I'll say is if you put all your eggs in one basket, there are worse baskets than Jersey Mike's.
Yeah,
Like
right. That's
I think if that's your basket, I think it's okay
not
if
a
those are
bad one. Yeah,
all your eggs are
right,
in that one.
right.
But sure, I mean, if what you want to do then is level up, if you want to go from 18 locations to 40 locations, and you don't have the patience that that one brand wants you to, because you then that's a conversation with the brand. They have to award you that geography. They have to work with you to, buy into more locations because that's a partnership, right? And if you want to level up faster than that, then buying into another brand is a great way to do that. Now, problem is if you have two or three brands in your portfolio, I mean, it's two or three systems you have to follow, two or three cultures you have to build. Of course, by then, I sure hope you have a management team. I mean, you have to have a pretty big oversight with a holding company that can manage all of those simultaneously and apply the lessons you've learned in the one franchise to the other franchises. And if you do have that, if you have those people, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that strategy. You need to also make sure that just using Jersey Mike's as the example, if you're used to Jersey Mike's as your franchisor, be prepared not to be able to find that very easily in another brand because they're exceptionally good at it. But B, try to find a franchisor who comes as close as it can so that, you have faith in them to work with you to build your units, to, trust them that the decisions that they make are in line with what you would want to make too, right? And of course, if you have sandwich, you're going to want to balance that with maybe a pizza concept, or if you're strong in lunch with your sandwich, maybe find a concept that's going to be strong in dinner or breakfast. Just because you'll always want to find that balance, I think, in your portfolio, which not only helps you to not be overwhelmed in any one particular area, but also will give you that diversity that you're probably ultimately looking for in your portfolio.
Well, I won't say who this is, but I will say because you know these folks very well. I think because they were at your event last week, so or Amanda was. But the other concept is Vicious Biscuit.
Mhm.
And I had George and Amanda on this podcast a month or so ago, and I told somebody afterwards, I was like, that to me literally felt like a master class in building how you start and build a like what you would do to get going. They've got their 8 company owned now they're franchising, but the way they're going about it and the deliberateness and the time and money that his own money that George has put into that and just taking their time to get this right, it seems like they laid a really strong foundation. Again, this is like just I mean, I spent an hour and a half with them, but I got out of that. Boy, if I were looking at franchise concepts personally, I'd look really hard at that one because they seem to have their ducks in a row.
That's what you want in a franchisor for sure. You do not want the franchisor who's trying to sell as many of them as they can. You don't want the franchisor who's looking at the exit, that you want the franchisor who's going to be a good partner that ultimately has your best interests in mind and is going to make decisions that work for you as much as for them. So absolutely, I agree with you that they seem to be a good one that understand that and are working to build the foundation to your point.
Yeah, they should be one of your growing. But what do you call the ones the growing brand award that you
Hot
were?
Concepts. Now they
Okay.
actually were one of our. We have a breakout brand award, and they were a breakout brand last year.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah,
Uh,
way ahead of you, Will. Way ahead of you.
all right, man. I thought I was like identifying it. Okay, well, yeah, you guys are on it. Yeah, well, look, it's not hard to figure out talking to them. I mean, they're freaking sharp. Okay, have you had any hot concepts that didn't pan out?
Yes.
Okay. What happens? Like you
Yes.
because you guys know what you're looking for, so you go and you're like, I think this might be the one. And then like something
Yeah.
doesn't like you don't have to name who, but like just generally like what are some of the things that haven't worked? Like what were some challenges they had or maybe mistakes they made that you see after the fact?
Yeah, we had one a couple of years ago that doesn't exist anymore. And they operated in the plant-based space. I'll say that. So for us, look, it's hard for us to get a total the peek under the hood that we want. If it was up to us, we would have all their financials. We would pour over their financials before we make those
Oh,
decisions.
right, right.
We have some high level financial information, but we do not have that peek under the hood that like, an investor might have. So we base our decisions on momentum, uniqueness of concept, leadership. Some of it's a gut check. Myself and my team, we've all been doing this for several years. So to some degree, it's like you know it when you see it. And again, having selected in the past, this was before I was at Nation's Restaurant News, but we've selected in the past Shake Shack and Kava, Raising Cane's. We've had a lot of good calls, so you kind of have a sense of who's got it. And so that is a big part of how we decide, but we have sort of the 30,000 foot viewpoint of their financials. Unfortunately, with some concepts not enough. And so the one I'm speaking of, again, was in the plant-based business, was incredibly unique, was growing quickly, had momentum on their side. But shortly after they were hot concept, there were red flags, which were they were clearly burning through cash, and that quick growth was a little bit of a facade. And I started to hear from some folks saying, "Hey, I don't know if that's as hot as you might think it is." And we're not going to sweep it under a rug. We'll own it, right? We recognize that we're not going to bat 1,000. But that's just the reality of it, is if we can't get that full look at what this brand is all about, and how could you possibly without actually going and working there and getting to know it and
Yeah.
understanding. So yeah, not super proud of that, but we refine every year, just iterate on it, right? So we had 6 winners this year, that I feel really strongly about. And so I think every year we're gonna have a little bit more confidence that we can get it right.
Oh, for sure. You'll get better and better. Who are the 6 winners this year?
This year it was Angry Chicks, Nashville hot chicken concept out of LA. Rodney Scott's Barbecue, relevant to the
Ooh.
South. Rodney Scott, the king of barbecue. Had the pleasure of having him on stage at Create to share more. That was really cool. James Beard Award winner, of course. He's scaling through Nick Pahakis's restaurant group.
Okay.
And so he has 5 locations. Mecha Noodle Bar, which has 10 locations. They're out of Connecticut, and it's a full service Asian soul food concept, which is really cool. Um, then we had Tacombi out of New York City, which is one of Danny Meyer's investments, a sort of fast casual hybrid, authentic taco concept. And then Toastique, which is a toast fast casual franchise. Oh, and one more is Putt Shack, which of course does is an entertainment concept doing mini golf. So all of them check, a variety of boxes, in that they're all growing in different ways. You have some franchised, some not franchised, a variety of menus, some global menus, some traditional menus, the service style and concept. You have entertainment, you have fast casual, you have full service. So again, felt really good about that. Had all the founders on stage at Create with us to kind of share their story of the challenges, the opportunities, and just really sharp people who they get it. So again, I feel pretty confident in this round of hot concepts.
Um, you nailed Rodney Scott, man. Rodney Scott's Barbecue was started in Hemingway, South Carolina, and I live in Charlotte. My mom grew up in Georgetown. I mean, Rodney Scott's has been around forever. I can't remember how
Yeah.
many years ago it started, but it was this little place in Hemingway, and it's probably like 35, 40 minutes from my grandparents' house in Georgetown. And I remember growing up. I mean, my granddad would take like we would drive to Hemingway to go to Rodney Scott's. Um, that dude is there. That's an authentic, incredible story. God, I would love to have Rodney. I'd love to talk to that guy. I remember hearing that they were growing and just thinking, man, that is not what I would have expected. Like,
Yeah,
like,
well, and we're not recognizing necessarily companies that we think will be 1,000 locations. Like I don't
yeah,
think
yeah,
Rodney
yeah.
Scott's ever going to have even 100 locations by nature of what he does. There's real love in what he
Mhm.
does, in the processes, and the whole hog, smoking and all that.
Mhm.
So it's like you can't scale that to 100 locations. But if he gets to 20, and he's scaling in the right way, he's growing into Birmingham and now Nashville. I had the chance, after Create Wrapped, we went over and checked out the new Nashville location. It's so good. But again, like it may not become a massive chain like you would expect some of these companies to be, but that's not, he's going to have an impact and has had a remarkable impact already. Even if he just was one location, he would have, but now he's taking that impact into other communities. So, so we're really excited about being able to be a part of that journey and give them that award.
He can put them all over the Southeast where that kind of barbecue is beloved for sure.
He would crush. He would crush. Absolutely.
Uh, so, um, what what are some of the things that it's a tough environment right now. What are some of the concerns that you're hearing that are pretty consistent across the industry about like where we are as an industry and where we need to get to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the challenges that the industry faces, all the same things they've been facing for the last couple of years, labor, food cost, yeah, all the the gamut of challenges that have come up in the last few years. It's wearing operators down, and
Yeah.
now to be here in 2024 and traffic is just, is just not good, and to be fighting your way out of that predicament with one eye on the future. I mean, it's just what I hear from restaurant operators, they're just tired, and overwhelmed. I mean, it's just because on top of all that, they really have a plethora of tools at their disposal to try to get out of this, right? I mean, especially when it comes to technology, but where to start? It's overwhelming how much that is available to them. And I constantly harken back to the recession, which, is when I started in this industry. First 3 years of my career, we were in the recession and constantly talking about economic conditions. And, I remind that, back then there was no mobile ordering, there was no DoorDash. It's amazing that, the industry got out of that recession and not unscathed, but that when the industry was able to get out of that, some of the most fruitful and creative years of the restaurant industry's history were 2012, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you saw really the advent of the modern fast casual industry at that point in time. You saw a lot of, global foods really take off at scale. So point being is that everybody's tired, everybody is struggling. Um, but through that necessity of being kind of backed into a corner and fighting your way out, I think at some point, I can't promise this will happen in 2025, but I know on the other side of this will be a period of abundance and creativity. And I'm excited about that. And it's not a great answer to your question, but it's mostly just to say it's just the same old stuff that everybody's struggling with. I think it's just the length, the duration of how long they've been struggling with it that's getting to be the hardest part. And so my hope for the sake of the whole industry is now that inflation is perhaps, coming down, now that things maybe are softening a little bit on the economy, or opening up a little bit more. Hopefully that means, customers start to get a little bit more willing to spend on food outside the home, and then that can give a jolt of energy to those operators who are just really tired.
I love the way you look at it, and I agree with that. It's no comfort to somebody who's listening who is in the middle of it operating a restaurant. It's just hard, and there are a lot of people that are tired right now. But you go back to the, sort of like the rules of thumb and heuristics that, have been around forever. And one is, and I don't know who said this, but, necessity is the mother of all invention or whatever. I may be butchering the quote, but I mean, the point being that like these are the times when things you couldn't have thought of become real because you have no choice. As you said, you're backed into the corner, and that's where you get,
Hmm.
it either breaks you or it makes you better, right? Like it
Yeah.
either you say, I'm done. I've done. And we saw it during COVID. Like there were a lot of, I mean, our customers who went, you know what? I've been at this for 30 or 40 years. I'm closing shop. Like I'm done.
Yeah.
And that happens. So it's like this thing where the individual operators sometimes um, pay the price for the industry getting better. So on an individual basis, it can be really hard, and it can be just it can bring you to your knees. But then the industry learns and gets better as a whole, and that permeates the industry eventually, and the industry just gets but just like it did in those early years after the Great
Yeah.
Recession. So
And it won't be without its victims, right? It
it
won't be
won't.
without
No,
some
it
restaurants
won't.
closing,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
that's
So,
part of it. That's part of it, and it's unfortunate, but the industry all because I mean, look, like you've got these creative minds coming in here, right? Like it's such an amazing industry as a collective that through periods of crisis somehow navigates and as an industry gets, I mean, again, COVID forced a lot of people to go, you know what? These are the 10 things that we've had on the back of our minds for a while now that we knew we needed to solve for. Now's the time. And if you
right.
did that and you embrace new technology and you figured out ways to be leaner and more nimble and to pivot, then you came out better. So many people tell me like, gosh, we are so much better run today than we were before COVID because of COVID.
Yeah.
Not in spite of it. So um it's this concept of have you ever heard of there's a guy named Nassim Taleb. He's written books called The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile and
Mm-mm.
uh I mean the concept of anti-fragility, he coined that, and it's like, look, you like any item can be one of three things. You can be fragile, robust, or anti-fragile. Fragile is like a teacup. Like if I took a teacup and I dropped it on this, hard table, it would break. This table right here is robust. If I hit it, it doesn't harm it, but it doesn't get better. Something that's anti-fragile, like maybe your muscles, you go to the gym, you put it under a short period of acute stress, and then and give it some room to grow, and it gets better. And I think
Hmm.
that, hopefully that you is sort of a mind trick with this stuff. Like if you're listening to this, like let this be a period that hopefully doesn't break you, or that hopefully you don't just endure, but you go, how do we leverage the stressor right now to grow and get better? That's what
Yeah,
anti-fragility is.
makes sense. And you have to lean into that, right? You have to embrace it,
You
and
have
that's not
to.
going to be easy.
You have to. You really do. Well, we've been at it almost an hour. I want to respect your time, but I want to ask you if is there anything else you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about that you think we should talk about?
Oh man, I mean, do you want to talk another hour about music? Because we could get into music and
Oh, dude, I gotta tell you, man, I'm so excited to come watch your band at some point. Like, so you don't play in Columbus, do you?
we're still a pretty new band, so what we're doing now in playing the small shows in the small town, just kind of building, making a name for ourselves, getting our resume, and then cracking into the Columbus market, which all of us are old and busy, and so to be able to find the time to talk to band promoters or show promoters and band bookers, things like that, it's a lot of work. And I'm just
Mhm.
glad I'm not the band manager. I just kind of go where I'm told when I'm told to be there. So I got a show this Saturday, though. We're playing, Athens has a very famous Halloween party, where thousands of people are uptown, and I'm playing it. So that'll be fun. Maybe that'll get our name out there a little bit.
So my daughter goes to Penn State, and uh,
Hmm.
and both she's been at Penn State for 3 years, but she still and my wife always say they talk about like, are we going to beat Ohio this year? And I'm like, oh, it's Ohio State. There is
Yeah,
a
it drives me
difference. And they're like,
crazy.
what's the difference? I'm like, there is a huge difference. Like,
There's an Oregon and Oregon State. There's an
there's a
Oklahoma
North
and Oklahoma
Carolina and there's
State,
a North Carolina
North
State, and
Carolina
they are
State.
not the same school. Like,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
always like,
That's why we always had a chip on our shoulder at Ohio U, because all those examples I just gave are all both very large
yeah,
athletic powerhouses. In the Ohio instance, Ohio University is a large university, 30,000 students, but because athletics has never been a big deal, it just doesn't have the same kind of reputation. But 20 years ago, there was actually a trademark battle over the word Ohio that between Ohio State and Ohio University, and Ohio University won. Ohio State cannot sell things that just say Ohio because they were trying to do that. But Ohio University, 75 years older than Ohio State University. So anyway, as you can
there
tell,
you go.
chip on our shoulder. I could go on, and I won't do it.
Well, I want to. I listen. I do want to get to see you play. I've been to Columbus some. Do you know? Do you know the guys over at Doyle?
Mm-mm.
Uh, Doyle HCM, accounting, payroll, bookkeeping, primarily for restaurants, franchises, things like that. They just won the some publication there just awarded them like the fastest growing business in Columbus.
Oh,
Yeah, but probably good folks for you to know. But I've been up there to see them. I had never been to Columbus until this year, but I've driven up there a couple of times. Pretty drive, going up 77 and cutting over there. So
I've done it probably 200
I was gonna
times,
say you've
way
probably
more
done that
than
quite a bit. Yeah,
when I
yeah.
lived in North Carolina. Yeah, it's beautiful. West Virginia doesn't get a lot of accolades as a state, but if there's one thing I can say for it, it is a beautiful state to drive through.
Okay. Last thing I'll say. So you have a podcast. I have a podcast. I'm assuming you
Yeah,
probably listen to some podcasts.
I do.
Have you ever heard of Martyr Made?
No.
Dude, all right. This is for your next drive. This is a
Okay. Okay.
5.5 hour episode. So Martyr Made is like it's like a long form history podcast. Long form
Okay.
meaning that like there is an episode, it's episode number 22, and it's about the 1920 miners' rebellion in southern West Virginia. And I had listened to this, it's 5.5 hours long, and it's so freaking good.
Wow.
But I had listened, I loved that particular episode. It's called it's the Martyr May podcast. It's called Who's America is the name of the episode. It's number 22. Okay. You drive through 77, and like the first time I drove a few months ago to Columbus, I started seeing these signs for Paint Creek, Cabin Creek, Kanawha County. And I'm like, holy crap, I know all these names because that's where this thing went down. So in the
Yeah.
1920s, the miners were like fed up, and like 10 to 20,000 of them picked up arms and marched on southern West Virginia and literally right through that part of the state. And we actually had to bring in the federal, like the army had to come in to help put this thing
Wow.
down. It's a freaking badass story. It's really cool, but it makes that drive
Yeah.
like you're seeing this stuff around you and it's beautiful and you're thinking of like all these miners down there. And anyway, there you go.
That's
That's for your
yeah,
next
that
drive
history
to
is
Durham.
very present all over that state. I mean, that coal mining industry is everywhere when you're there for sure. No, I like hardcore history, that podcast where he does like two a year and they're 5 hour episodes. So right up my alley.
It's that's how I got dialed into that. I was listening to Hardcore
Mm,
History and I heard about this. Hardcore History is great. Wrath of the Khans is like one of the coolest
yeah.
series ever and all that stuff. So, well, look, man, I'm really glad we got to meet and talk.
Likewise.
I could talk to you for a whole lot longer, but I'm going to let you roll. But I appreciate you a lot and thanks for what you're doing. And I love your passion and
Absolutely.
enthusiasm for the industry and your knowledge for the industry. And this is like going to be highly educational, I think, to anybody listening. So, thank you, Sam. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Thanks for having me on.
All right. We'll see you.
All right, take care.
All right. Bye.